Roll call.
Parker. Here. Miscelinich.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Zittergruen. Here. Chisel. Here. Whittle.
Here.
Neal.
Here.
Okay, we have Carrie has the honor of swearing in Cody Whittle.
Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
I, Cody Whittle, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa,
and that I will faithfully and impartially, to the best of my ability, discharge all the duties of the at-large council person in the city of Decorah, Iowa, as now or hereafter required by law.
and that I will faithfully and impartially, to the best of my ability, discharge all the duties of the at-large council person in the city of Decorah, Iowa, as now or hereafter required by law. Thank you.
I'm happy to see that Jabber's got your computer there, so when we come back on Thursday, you'll be ready to roll with the budget.
Yeah.
Thought I'd just give you a heads up.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, public comment. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the council for anything that is not on the agenda? Come up, state your name and your address, please. Oh, could you speak into the speaker? Because we do have people that are on.
I'm Pete Teacup. My wife and I, Elaine, just recently moved to Decorah, and we lived down in the Ames area for 50 years. I grew up on a farm near Festina and went to Iowa State University, got a degree in art and photography, and then we ran a photography studio in Story City for 45 years, just retired to Story City. So those of you who don't know, Story City is the second largest Norwegian settlement in Iowa. Decorah is the largest, so we're moving on up. But anyway, what I'm here this evening for is to propose something. We love bike riding, and we're on a bike trail. Absolutely love the bike trail. It's incredible. But there's one eyesore, and that is under the bridge by College Drive near Weiss Buick. And so I want to show you a few pictures here, if I can. So this is going to show the bridge, the bike path here, and there's a lot of graffiti and stuff here. This is the back side of that wall, this one showing the graffiti. This is the second column in. What I'm proposing to do is to paint a mural on these three columns. So it'll be the second column in and three murals here. These will be probably a couple possibilities. I can do anything you want, but it'd be nature scenes, three nature scenes. So that's what I'm proposing. What I'm asking is if the council would consider funding the cost of the paint.
I'm going to just stop you real quick.
Yep.
The public comment is bring stuff to the council
Okay.
without any discussion.
Okay,
So if you just show what you have
Yep.
and then maybe talk to one of the council members afterwards,
okay,
and then we could go a little further. We don't do that at the public comment.
okay. So I'll just finish up here and then
Okay, that would
I've
be
got a
great.
cost sheet I can hand out, and that's it.
Okay,
So I joined the Lions Club, and I've talked to a few Lions members, possibility that they would help me do the labor. So I would do the labor and the painting of the murals. So what I would request from the council would be the funds to do that, and I've got it broke down here, be a total of $1,200 maximum. And here's a sample of what I did in the city of Story City. This is 32 feet high, 90 feet long, represents some of the highlights of Story City, and just wanted to show you what's possible.
okay, just
Thank
check
you.
with any of the council members at some given time.
Okay, can I hand out that sheet and just,
Sure.
okay.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you very much. Anyone else who wishes to speak to the council? Hearing, stating none, hearing and seeing none. Consent agenda.
Item A, minutes of the January 6th, 2025 meeting. Item B, claims. C, change order number 2, final project quantity adjustments for Decorah 2024 dry run channel improvements project. D, final pay application number 3 for Decorah 2024 dry run channel improvements project. And E, resolution accepting Decorah 2024 dry run channel improvements project as complete.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Olson, seconded by
Neil?
Neil. Thank you. Any other discussion? Roll call?
Olson,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Miscelinich,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Whittle.
Aye.
Motion carried. Conduct public hearing on amending section 17.36.020 of the Decorah Municipal Code regarding site plans. Can you give some background on that, please?
Sure, so I'll combine background for items 6 and 7. 6 is the public hearing. Item 7 is the actionable item of council. The proposed amendment is for section 17.36.020, entitled Site Plans, and it's the process behind it. The only change proposed is the requirement threshold. Current code reads anything more than a duplex requires a site plan. So for example, this was noted at the October 21st meeting during the presentation of the Quandall site plan for a 4-family home on Washington Street. That same site plan, or that site plan has the same requirements as a Walmart, for example. So that code applies equally to both types of projects. Planning and zoning discussed this and recommends the proposed ordinance, which would change that threshold to anything more than a 4-family residential dwelling would require a site plan review.
Okay, I'll open a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Hearing and seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Consider ordinance on amending sections 17.36.020 of Decorah Municipal Code regarding site plans, first reading.
I'd move for approval of the first reading.
Second.
Motion made by Chisel, seconded by Zittergruen. Any further discussion? Hearing seen none. Roll call?
Chisel,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Miscelinich,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Whittle,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Parker.
Aye.
Motion carried. Resolution accepting stormwater utility easement at 1111 Montgomery Street. Can you give background on that, please?
Sure. The property owner at 1111 Montgomery Street, which is jointly owned with the Stone Ridge Church as well as the development property there for both halves of that building, is wanting to grant a stormwater easement to the city where currently there's a private drainage culvert. In investigating this, we've learned that the pipe appears to be from the developer installing this section to benefit that development at 903 Commerce or the church property sometime in the 1980s. No easement was granted at that time, and it is a privately maintained culvert. However, the city storm sewer pipe that runs from Commerce does run currently into that pipe in question. At the time, it used to be just a natural open ditch, and so at that time, we made connection with the developer. Included in Dropbox file as 008C is an aerial image that does show what I had just talked about before the full development. The property owner has requested that the city assist with repairs and replacement of failing sections of that private culvert, since it does convey stormwater from Commerce Drive. While this action doesn't obligate the city to assist, it is necessary to allow the city participation, the easement itself. Planning and zoning has reviewed this and does recommend acceptance of the easement.
I move the resolution.
Motion made by Zittergruen, seconded by Olson. Discussion?
Travis, I appreciate the last sentence that we're not obligated. Just
getting an easement doesn't obligate the city to participate in any repair, but it allows the possibility. In 30 years, is a city manager, maybe still you, I don't know, going to
Oh,
be,
dear God, no.
are they going to be, looking at the fact that there's an easement now and say, well, that must have meant the city intended to help with the culvert work? I guess what I'm saying is, does accepting this, whether or not it obliges us, does it create a sense that we're obliged to participate in this?
The short answer is yes, and not just future Travis 30 years from now, but there is an, maybe rightfully so or wrongfully so, since the city stormwater does dump into this, there is probably some level of city participation in the near future. Anything, of course, beyond my pursuing threshold has to come to this council for consideration.
Now, the city stormwater used to flow across the same property. The development never changed where the stormwater went. It just required a more expensive way of moving the water. And it's like, theoretically, that culvert produces economic benefit to the development. And I just, I get that it is draining city water, but they clearly wanted the culvert there when they were developing the property. And I don't know if I love the precedent of sort of being put on the hook 40 years later for choices that were made by the people who were developing the property.
Yeah, and that's why I did want to make this pretty clear that this isn't necessarily an obligation, but it does open the door if we have to. That's a conversation John and I have been having for quite some time, actually, with this property.
Okay. Well, I think I'm going to vote in favor of the motion. I just wanted to ensure that I understood what we were committing ourselves to. Thanks.
Correct.
Is it only a runoff from just that property? I know there's been a lot of developments around there.
No, so there'll be a time when this will come up with a probably quite different recommendation. The Super 8 Motel further west of this property does have a private storm, or excuse me, private drainage culvert that empties into the same system, and the hotel's built on top of it. At least a portion of it where the extension was made and there's a connection point between the two buildings, that's right on top of it. That's a very different conversation than this one here that's on the edge of the property under some asphalt.
I just wondered, because there's been a lot of construction in that area over the time.
Does Quick Star's stormwater runoff run off into that same area as well?
It does, but that's downstream from this location. And that was discussed as part of the site plan there, that there was supposed to be a drainage easement assigned to the city, but we don't know that that plat actually was recorded. There's a lot of things in play with this whole area.
And there's a lot of stormwater runoff going to end up in that area too, because of all that's out there,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Any further discussion? Roll call?
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Olson,
Aye.
Chisel,
Aye.
Whittle,
Aye.
Neal,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Miscelinich.
Aye.
Motion carried. Discussion and possible action on an additional educational material for MEU vote. Can I get background on that, please?
Sure. So, the group of Sustainability Commission members that was tasked with council-improved voter education material is requesting that council consider some additional proposed questions and answers that they have been frequently asked of officials and staff. So a specific question I want to point out from a staff perspective especially is, will My Energy customers in Decorah be affected if the city establishes a municipal electric utility? With the proposed answer, the city does not intend to request a certificate of authority from the Iowa Utilities Commission to furnish electric service to My Energy's customers within the city. Know that that is a policy decision of this council, so it's not a factual based from a perspective that it's in text of Iowa code or something like that. That's your guys' purview as council if you'd want to pursue that or not. So that's one that is, whilst if council approves one or the other, it is still factual basis, but it's not like an Iowa code fact. So that's the one I really wanted to point out, that that's one that I myself have taken a few phone calls, questions on as well. And the best I can say is that I've never heard of any conversations around filing to try and acquire my energy territory should there be a successful vote. So this would be a policy decision of the council. All of the questions, the proposed language has been reviewed by the city's special legal counsel, as well as the Iowa Ethics Board Executive Director and Legal Counsel.
I make a motion that we pass the additional educational materials for the MEU vote with one change. In the feasibility study question, where it says that the council will, I'd like to change the word will to may. The council may conduct a feasibility study.
Want to change it in both those places?
In that feasibility question,
Right, there's two spots where
yeah,
it
may
mentioned it.
instead of will.
What about the first sentence, Emily?
Yeah, right, the first, and the,
Getting back to it.
it says the city does intend to conduct a feasibility study.
It can be may, yep. So I guess
So in the-
making the first question strongly indicate that it is a may, not a will, since we have not voted on that.
So the city may conduct a feasibility study as the first sentence, and the city may conduct a feasibility study as the last sentence.
Yes,
That's your motion?
that's my motion.
Second.
Thank you. I will say, as far as the My Energy piece and a policy decision, I don't think that it has ever been discussed, thought of, or would be in our current vote that we would be going after, or even thinking about My Energy Service Territory. We've been very clear all along that it is Alliance Service Territory that we want to investigate and find out if there's a better option. It would require 2 petitions. I don't think we're looking at that. So I feel very comfortable with the My Energy language.
Any other council comments?
How about reference to the last 2 questions? It seems like the answer we're providing here is still very vague, because I think a lot of it has to do with future things that we would be able to do or wanting to do, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen in the future. So I'm not sure that these answers actually clear up those questions as they're being asked in this. So I guess that's another problem I have with these 4 questions that we're answering here, or proposing to answer.
How did you feel about the first 2?
Well, like I said, Emily and I had discussed the first one, and the changes that she asked to be made there would rectify that one as well, or rectify that one. As far as question 2 goes, I thought as far as establishing territory, isn't that actually up to the IUC to do that? Set territory?
Ultimately, they'll determine, but the council would still have to file a petition to initiate. So yeah, ultimately it is up to the IUC.
But in a service territory. It's not up to them to give us anyone's service territory, just the one we petitioned for. I think I'm okay. I'm okay with vague. I know because there is multiple steps we can take, but I do think people really want these answers.
You know, I appreciate Emily saying that she's okay with vague, and this is maybe speaking to Kirsten's concerns as well, that there's a lot that we don't know about what happens after any potential vote. We don't know how the vote will go. We hope very much as a city, it seems our official position is that we give our voters as good of information as possible to make a vote, and then depending on what they opt, we're going to have leadership choices as a council potentially. There's a lot of people in this community who are very happy to say exactly what we're going to do after the March referendum, but most of them aren't seated at this dais. I know many members of this council are going to be, thoughtful in response to the voter referendum. We'll look at things like, how decisive any particular vote was. We'll also consider, indications we get from the Iowa Utilities Commission, indications we get from the financial market, from our attorneys and from our staff. We don't have the information to decisively say, this is our playbook if the vote passes. And I think that's honest about these answers, that it never tries to decisively say, this is the city playbook if the vote passes. It says everything that the city honestly can right now, which is there are a number of options going forward after any potential vote. And the city is, going to have to consider them all the way we consider a lot of other big decisions that come before us. If people think it's, I guess, obvious or simple what the next steps after a successful or unsuccessful referendum would be, they're claiming knowledge that no one really has. And so I like this. I think it's honest, and I think it's honest with the voters that there are just some things that we don't know yet. That's part of the reason that I hope this referendum passes, because I think that'll give us access to answering some of these questions we don't know the answers to.
Let me ask staff real quick, is the major reason we want to put these 4 questions out there to the public is because of the amount of staff time that's being required to answer phone calls and stuff in reference to these items when they're called in?
So Carrie and I have talked about this before when, for example, the first set of voter education material was approved. We were starting to get a lot of questions coming in, and staff was trying to direct, please review the voter education material that's available on the city's website. Well, what about this? What about this? And I have directed staff, send as much of that back to me. Like, don't try and make it up. Don't wing it. Send it back to me. And to my knowledge, the biggest one that we're getting, because they're getting back to me, is the My Energy question. Yeah, My Energy.
I think my stance on it is if there are people asking these questions, there are more out there that have these same questions. And so, some people are reaching out and contacting staff for these questions, and some people are sitting at home with these questions unknowing what those answers are. Reading through these questions, I think they're valid questions that if people have, I think the city needs to be as transparent as possible where we stand at this time. I think at this point, if people have questions and we're not answering them, I don't think that's a very good thing. I mean, people need to make an educated decision and a vote how they want to vote come March, and the only way they can do that is by answering questions that people have. And if these are questions that the city has gotten, I think we should answer them to the best of the ability. And I agree with Steve. I think we don't necessarily have 100% this is what's going to happen based on these votes, but because me as a council member, I don't know what's going to happen after these votes, right? We got to pass that first, and then we start looking at things, and then we can make decisions then on how things are going to happen. But with these being vague, I think, like Steve said, they're vague for a reason, because we don't really have a lot of the answers, but this is what we know at this time, and I think that is appropriate.
I think it's also important to underline that this is how Iowa legislation dictates that this plays out, that there's a process in place, and a lot of the things that many people are eager to know the answer to, including me, some of these answers, many of these things are simply things that Iowa law says we don't get these answers until after a potential successful referendum. We're doing this in the right order. We're doing it the way that Iowa law tells us to. And that sometimes means that our honest answer to questions is we're not sure yet.
Any other staff or council comments?
I guess the other problem I have is that these answers, several of these are very nuanced, and I think they almost need a personal response. And I don't want to take up staff time by giving those responses, but at the same token, I think a possible solution to that would be if they would be willing to refer these questions that they get to the particular council member that person is calling in from, that I'd be more than willing to field these questions that way, rather than putting out an additional informational page in addition to the 4 pages that we currently have.
The problem with that is, it's like when I held a community session, right? I mean, that's me speaking for me, right? That's not me speaking for council, or even on behalf of the city, right? We put these questions out. This is the city's, we are going to vote tonight. This is the city's official answer to these questions. So when I have a coffee and conversation, these are the answers that I would give. That's what we have decided. But anytime someone calls me to talk about the MEU, you know what bent they're going to get. Me as a council person, as a individual that we haven't discussed here at council, because I'm representing the constituents who want a positive referendum. So I do think that in answering these questions, what we're doing is we're saying the city is aware that we're getting these questions a lot, and we have, you know, our education committee and our city staff have looked at them. We sent them to our lawyers for approval. We sent them to the Ethics Commission for approval. And these are the official city answers, as opposed to any one of us individually getting a question, which we know is not speaking on behalf of council.
The other question is, are we gonna be back here again next week answering 4 more questions? And then the next week answering 3 more questions, and keep adding to this?
Yeah, and I think,
And I think that's a problem.
I mean, it was kind that Jim was here tonight, but I do think that the reasons these are before us is because the committee is about ready to print with their materials, and they want to get as much scope as they can in terms of what people have wanted. There is a timeline, essentially, on when we can get information out, and we're getting to that timeline. And I think that the Education Committee, in good faith, wanted to make sure that they were making a list as encompassing as what people thought. We gave them a list of questions before this ever went out. Now it's out, people are asking more questions. I'd say this is a pretty good indication of what people are most interested in at this point. I don't anticipate they would come back for more questions, because I think they're gonna get their materials ready out and out the door.
Right, and while I understand that the committee would then have these questions in addition, I'm more concerned about the staff and the questions they're gonna have to be fielding. So, I mean, are we gonna wanna come back again in a week because staff is getting bombarded with 3 or 4 more additional questions? So we can approve that to go out, so they don't have to continue to answer those?
You know,
That's why I'm leaning to the idea of having council being the person to go to for answering these questions, as opposed to putting out an additional sheet.
But we can't. I mean, unless we just sit here and take questions. I mean, we could do a community forum and let us ask them questions, right? All of us together.
Well, these people that are calling into the staff, they could just as well call us or email us as well.
Yeah, but
some of
staff,
them are. I mean,
yeah,
Well,
some
that's
of
what
us
I'm saying.
do, but
That's what I'm
staff
saying.
is just reiterating what we are saying as a council. So in some ways, yes, they're gonna call staff and they're gonna be like, all right, you can't talk to me, call a council person, and then they're gonna have to decide, well, what council person should I call? Because what answer will I get if I call each council person? I would imagine an answer from me is gonna look very different than one from Randy. And I'm not saying anything against Randy, I'm just saying we often have different answers. That's why we are 7 council people. This speaks as one voice. These are the questions that have been asked. Here's what council is saying.
Kirsten, I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, and I'm trying to think my way to like a, you know, from staff's perspective, and we could just ask, having a list of answers, especially to the My Energy question, so that we take you off the hook of having to determine policy. To me, that seems like an important thing that we can do to support our staff is, you know, this is a policy question. Would we go after my service territory if this thing passes or not? If we pass this, we're giving a policy answer and staff has it. And so I feel like that's a good service we're doing to make staff's life better. I look at this list of answers and it all seems very straightforward and factual, with the exception of the answer to the question, you know, will the city go after the My Energy customers in the city limits? That's a kind of a policy answer. It's one I'm comfortable saying, no, that's not something I would contemplate, no matter any sort of foreseeable outcome. The rest of these things are so purely factual that I'm comfortable with saying yes to them. And if the staff start getting the same exact question next week about a new thing that has a pretty clear factual answer, and they come to us and say, hey, we've got another question that keeps coming up, here's a proposed response, what do you think? I'm okay with it. Like, I guess I'd rather the city tell the voters as much as we can at this point, and these 4 answers seems like part of that work.
Other council people want to comment in? Could you,
Item
do
3.
you have your microphone turned on?
Yeah, it's turned on. Getting down to item 3, where it says, you know, it needs to make a case on how much might it cost. What does it cost to petition the IUC?
There isn't a cost. No one knows.
Sorry, mic was off. Couldn't tell you.
Okay, so there's kind of a vague point there, and then we're all of a sudden jumping into possibly putting out GO bonds without a revenue stream to pay them back. That's kind of dangerous.
No, we're not saying we will, we're saying,
I know, but I'm
Okay.
just saying it appears that the city is saying this is something that we may have to do, and we don't have a revenue stream to pay them back, so it's a dangerous road to go down.
that's what people want to know most, right? This whole idea of obligation bonds and revenue bonds, first of all, like we should just have a city expose on bonding and what that means. That's the number one thing voters want to know. What's this going to cost us as taxpayers? I would want to know that, right? Because I'm a taxpayer. But the truth is we don't have that answer, and there's many ways we can go about doing this. But what they want to know is, am I going to get a say if it's going to impact my taxes? So by putting in that if for some reason we decided, which I would be shocked if we ever did, right, that we want to use an obligation, we want to go into debt to do this, then the voters would have another shot at it. And that's what we're letting them know here, right? That they would have another shot if somehow we all decided that we were going to burden the city with debt on that. I just don't think that's what our intentions are, but I think we need to let them know that they get a say in that. We can't burden them with debt without another vote.
To be clear, Emily, there are some debts that we can, I just want to make sure that we're speaking very accurately here.
Yeah.
That there is an amount that we can borrow without a general obligation referendum and 60% passage. That is accurate, and I just want to make sure that
Yep,
we're not
I get
claiming
that.
that anything else is true. I don't intend to do that, but, since we're talking in public, it's important to be clear about that.
And even those, also to be even more clear, also those approved below that threshold still are subject to reverse referendum, which would then require 60%.
And when I say that, that is what I mean. So thank you for saying that, right? People can call a referendum anytime we're going to do that. Doesn't matter how much we're going to spend.
Christopher?
My biggest point is I know for a fact, I've heard many of these questions asked from people, so I feel it's a good point to get those out there so there are at least some solid answer base. And, if that does come with more questions, they know the path that they can to ask those questions as well. My biggest thing is kind of how Kirsten said, I do feel, especially with question 3 and 4, just how the answers are structured, it may warrant more questions from individuals within the public. That's my main thing.
Well, I think the motion was made to accept the questions as they were,
With the two.
With the
edits.
changing it.
with the two edits, yes, thank you. So before you would change that, you have to vote on this motion first. And if you choose to change something after, then you bring back a different motion.
She already proposed it
She
with the
already-
changes in
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Right,
Yep.
right, nope,
Yep.
that's correct. Okay. Roll call?
Neal,
Aye.
Zittergruen,
Aye.
Chisel,
No.
Whittle,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Misselinich,
I
Olson.
No.
Okay, motion carried. Discussion and possible action on council rules and procedures. Can you give some information on that? I had asked, Kristen and I had worked on it, and then asked Travis to kind of check with John at the same time.
Okay, so at the December 2nd, 2024 meeting, the council received public comment calling into question the city's public comment policy and rules surrounding the council meeting. Mayor Borowski has researched other communities' policies and wishes the council to discuss and consider possible amendments to the council rules and procedures regarding those comments from the public. That's in Dropbox's file 10A. In regards to suggested change number 3, it states that each person be given 3 minutes. While this might generally be the right amount of time, staff would advise that it might be better to, instead of hard and fast, as might be noted tonight, no time limit was actually imposed. And so that is under our current rules, is at the discretion of the mayor or mayor pro tem in her absence. So, if we left without that hard and fast 3-minute time limit, it would at least allow for maybe even the other end of the spectrum, as opposed to anticipating only one person providing comment and not, not imposing that time limit. The opposite might be true, where, God forbid, we have another Walmart situation where I heard that that wall was pulled back and everybody everywhere, and it might be advised in that situation that everybody's got 1 minute, because you're going to hear 100 comments about the same thing over and over and over and over again. 100 times a minute is still over an hour and a half of the same thing over and over again. So I don't need to talk about that over and over again.
Hey, I have a question on that piece.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be, if it's the 3 minutes are set, can the mayor actually choose to extend it so there's no extension possible, right?
Yeah, if you adopt it as hard and fast in the council rules and procedure, it's 3 minutes.
I think all of the cities that I looked at did have a limit, whether it was 3 or 4 or 5, but it also indicated to whoever was speaking what time element they had, which is what I'm looking to be able to do.
So maybe something that indicates is a time limit of generally 3 minutes is imposed, but maybe shortened due to anticipated volume, something to that effect.
Otherwise designated by the
I would
person leading the meeting or something like that?
I would not recommend any kind of verbiage that allows to extend beyond, because then you got to argue, well, I actually fit this. I should get an extension. This fits that rule.
Okay.
I wouldn't recommend that. If you want to set hard and fast 3 minutes with the ability to dial it down based on capacity, we could work verbiage in like that, or simply leave it out.
If you leave it open-ended, is there a way to put verbiage in that would give the mayor or pro tem the ability to stop at any point?
I was going to say.
I'll let John jump in this. I play an attorney. I'm not an attorney.
I think you could have language in there that would say that the mayor will give reasonable amount of time. I think it's probably best, though, at the beginning of any public comment, and the mayor often does this, say each speaker shall have 3 minutes, and then they know. Now, again, if you don't have any time limit in there, if she sees it's a full house, she says, well, today I'm going to give all speakers 2 minutes. And she just has to do that in advance. Now, if she doesn't give a time limit and somebody's up there and they keep talking, there's still a limit. I mean, somebody can't totally hijack the city council meeting, but it does make it a little bit more problematic. But the mayor would have to interrupt and say, please wrap it up in so many minutes. I mean, you got to give people, try to give them some reasonable notice.
So if you're saying that, then you're suggesting we should leave it in. 3 in.
No, my suggestion is not to leave 3 in.
What if we just
To
said?
be clear.
Yeah, I mean,
To be clear, I'm not in agreement with that.
why
You
can't?
could set that limit.
Why don't we just?
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
no,
sorry,
no.
I'm just trying to think out loud here. If you didn't have a time limit there, but like tonight, when Mr. Teacup came up here, if we would have said, you got 3 minutes to present to us, so we're arbitrarily setting it for 3 minutes for tonight's meeting because we didn't have anybody else put their hand up for public comment.
Correct.
If we have 10
Okay.
people put their hand up, the mayor could say, each have 2 minutes.
Yeah, as I think through this, a little bit of the danger with that is you have one person that's here today and you give them 5 minutes, and the next week there's only one, and they're talking about who knows what, and you want to give them only 3 minutes, and they say, well, last week the guy talking about the mural got 5 minutes, and you're giving me only 2 or 3 minutes. So that's, that you just got to be prepared. I think you have flexibility. It's your meeting, right? You guys get to set the rules. I just think there's got to be some type of reasonable notice, but I don't want you to handicap yourself unnecessarily either.
Well, at the end, you say, I am also okay with leaving this in.
What if we said that each person wishing to speak during public comment period shall be given 3 minutes unless otherwise designated by the mayor.
Yeah, I mean, something like that.
Okay.
Yep. I think that gives
Okay.
everybody enough notice and flexibility.
I would say just as long as it's either generally known or accepted that that's not an extension beyond 3 minutes. Right? Because then you're running into that same issue of,
Limited to 3.
you're gonna apply the rule of 3 minutes here, except how do you extend beyond the rule that exists?
And you also remember, if you have a speaker you know is coming, you put them, I mean, you generally already put them on the agenda for a presentation, and that's not limited by this 3 minutes. And the same could happen. You have somebody here for 3 minutes, and you're like, wow, there's a whole lot of information here. We want you to come back and be on the regular agenda and give them more time.
That's what I was thinking.
I would-
If it goes beyond the 3-minute scope, have somebody submit an agenda item.
I do feel like if someone's got something to tell council that's more than 3 minutes, that maybe that is an agenda item, right? Because they're obviously going to want more of a conversation, hopefully. You know, I mean, you wouldn't want to just be someone just just staring at us.
Well, and that's what we did tonight with the gentleman.
Right, right. Who maybe we should have
Right.
had come back and be on the agenda. I mean,
Well,
it's,
and that's, so I
yeah.
want to, Paul's still here, so I want to be clear. Staff came back and asked how best to handle it, and I said, email individual council members, email us, we can push it out to all the council members, or come to this meeting and present to all the council members. And then, as part of our council rules and procedures, if 2 of you tell me, hey, that's a great idea, let's put that on the agenda, that's how we move forward with this. So that gives me the directive then to work with Paul on possibly doing that.
Okay.
Pete, sorry.
Because I wish to have the 3 minutes to be in there, because I think it gives people an idea of how much time they can speak. If they want to speak more, then they get a hold of staff or council.
Yeah.
But-
Again, it's just the understanding that with that Menards or Walmart situation, everybody's getting 3 minutes.
that's why I think it needs
Yeah.
to say, or at other discretion. I mean, I'm not okay with leaving it just 3 minutes. Because
Okay.
I mean, even the mask mandate was, I think that meeting was 3 hours.
Quick
So-
start too.
What did you
Yeah.
say for wordage from beyond?
I would put something like, each person wishing to speak during public comment shall be given approximately 3 minutes to share comments unless otherwise time designated by the mayor. Something cleaner than that.
I think use the word ordinarily. I mean, we ordinarily give the public
Yeah.
3 minutes, but at the mayor's discretion, we may adjust that for the sake of official
I do
meetings.
agree with that.
And we can massage that.
Yeah,
and bring it back
okay.
to council approval.
Are you all right with that too, Randy?
It's,
Yeah, because I know, John said when we have some of these bigger ones, I know with, I don't know, Mayor, if you were part of them, or if it was Mayor Arndt, that would sit here and say, when we had a full house, you know, if you're gonna keep repeating it,
yeah.
just hold your hand up. You know,
We
you
did
know.
get to that. I remember that.
You know, the one person say what they want to say, and then anybody else want to repeat that, and they hold their hand, okay, you don't have to speak, so let's get on to the next one.
I think.
Okay, that sounds good. The next one is number 6.
Staff did want to point out, change number 5, which would
number
require, isn't that one of them?
No, I think it's 6.
Oh, 6? All right.
Wait, I have a question about 5. So would this, number 5, public comment should only be made about topics relevant to city business. Would that mean Pete couldn't have come tonight because it's not business that we have? Or could he come because it's about us, our business?
It is still about our business.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks for being our example for the night. by
Yeah,
the way.
thanks for being our subject.
Perfect.
Glad you showed up.
Yeah.
Okay, then on to 5.
All
I
right.
know that, or 6, sorry, thank you. I know when I looked at some of the other cities, they had wordage such as this.
Well, and this
Yeah.
is where I was asking if somebody goes over their limit or veers into this, does the mayor or pro tem have the ability to say enough?
Yes.
The time limit, yes. As long as it's applied, as we've talked about here, it's universally across everybody speaking. this one gets hard. This one's tricky at best. I did reach out to some of the cities noted and that the mayor put down that she had spoke to, and even within their own administration, I got kind of competing feedback. For example, Algona, the city administrator said, "Well, you know, this is how we view it. This is how we'd handle it. We haven't had issues with it yet." And then the assistant's like, "Yeah, you know, I'm a little leery about if the mayor actually does try and enforce this on whether it's enforceable or not." And the courts are actually also split on this situation. So we don't have clear guidance on courteous and polite demeanor, refrain from using language that's inappropriate, combative, obscene, slanderous, profane, abusive, or attacks of personal character on city officials. So there's a split in the federal appellate courts on the constitutionality of that kind of prohibition or stopping a speaker for doing that. There's a difference between that and a disruption of the meeting, which is, you know, saying obscenities or things like that are different than yelling them and create a general disruption. It's odd enough that the disruption is easier to stop because you're not basing it on the content, the yelling, screaming, and trying to incite a riot, whatever that might be, versus what they are saying. That's more difficult for the mayor or mayor pro tem to monitor and enforce, and it's really going to put the onus on them to make a judgment call. So know that if it's in there, it's going to be really fine line and difficult.
My inclination, I'm willing to hear out others too. I know that these are tricky topics. My inclination is that if there's truly split legal guidance on these issues, that we should err on the side of being more permissive to speech, and you know, knowing that that sometimes creates uncomfortable or frustrating situations. I think it's always good for elected officials to err on the side of hearing what people have to say, and that the solution to speech we disagree with isn't to stop it or try to circumvent it. It's to say things that we think are correct. And so to my part, I would rather that we be very clear that we are extremely content neutral in our rules with regard to what people are saying. And you know, if the courts allow us to do more than that, that doesn't mean we have to. And I'd rather err on the side of just letting people have their say. And I know that can sometimes create distractions for the council, but we've talked about this for 15 minutes already today. And I think we are responding to a total of maybe 10 minutes of comments, and I'd rather we not over-respond.
I have one comment on that. I agree with Steve completely. I actually think that we are better off not limiting speech. But then we should address, I think, if someone is standing there talking to a council member or about a council member. Number 3 says, no one other than the council in person having the floor shall be permitted to enter into any discussion. I do think that it is well within any council person's right to be able to speak to any accusation towards them. I don't think it is fair to ask any individual to hear something about themselves and not themselves then have their own free speech to be able to say something in their defense.
Let's
yeah.
hear from others. Councilor is first, and then I'll come back.
Well, I'm going to go back to number 6 then, since it is kind of a
Well, that's one word.
gray, wishy-washy area. Would we be better taking that out and putting at the bottom, we request all speakers to follow the following decorum?
I like that.
Or are encouraged.
Yeah,
Right,
I like that
right,
one.
something like that. I think it's good to get that language in there,
In there, but
just so that people
if we can't
are aware
enforce it,
that's,
then
right,
why
that's where
have
we
it in
wanna
as
go
part
with
of
it
it?
and stuff like that. But it does leave it up to the discretion of the mayor or the mayor pro tem when they're dealing with it to figure out how best to deal with it, that's for sure.
I like that option.
Yep.
At least they can read it and see it.
No, and I think
without
that's,
taking the limit.
Well then, Mayor, what do you think about Emily's And I think it's a pretty good point that if we're saying as a city, you know, we are open to hearing everything the public has to say, and we don't want to be in the business of sort of saying some kinds of speech or, you know, tolerate and other kinds we're going to shut you down because it gets too personal or attacky. I don't think that's good. I think we ought to not actually dictate what people say. That said, I do think that for the same reason, if council members are named directly, I do think that as a city, we ought to allow our rules to let people speak for themselves. I mean,
I don't think I
Yeah.
don't think I have an issue with that, but I also agree that if we change, and I also see where 6, if we put that in, really does determine that people don't have freedom of speech. But I do like the idea of stating instead of having it in the suggestion, is in the requesting form.
Don't we have something in there too referencing that the comments should be directed at the mayor, or at the mayor or the
Or the
person
council as a
presiding
whole,
over-
not
over the-
individuals.
That's the
Right.
first one.
not to individuals?
Which is true. I just think that sometimes people do violate that, and
Right.
Well, that's where we need to have the ability to just say, that's it.
That's it, right? Direct-
but I think that
directing
is
the comment.
harder. I mean, that's, I agree that in terms of upholding everyone's First Amendment right to say what they want, I think it is much harder for the mayor to be like, you may not, that's it, you're done, as opposed to, so let the council person have a chance to speak, right? I mean, this has happened to me twice personally.
Yep.
And I have to admit that it's one thing to, and this is what I've noticed, is that it is one thing to hear something and to sit and that's fine, but the public hears it and never hears a response from you. And to me, that's a lie left hanging, and that's not fair to council, and it's not fair to the public. So I do think if someone is attacked by a member of the public, as a council person, we should have the right to be able to respond.
Except that what we've stated above is that there is no dialogue during the public.
True, except that number 3 says no one other than council and the person having the floor shall be permitted to enter into a discussion. So that's number 3 above.
I would strongly encourage keeping 2. Public comment should not be a dialogue between the council as a whole and whoever's coming and speaking on a matter. I think what Councilmember Neal is saying is that item 3 would allow for a council member to provide a response to public comment, not a dialogue. Your
I
3 minutes
see.
is up, you're done.
Yeah.
Now, council member wishes to speak as a response.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That is correct, thank you. A response is, a council member may choose to respond if,
So that would be, I don't think I had included that in the suggested changes, correct?
It's not as proposed as a suggested change, but
Okay.
what Councilmember Neal, I think, is getting to is, it's in there, we're just not explicitly stating it.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be a discussion, it would just be a response.
And I think it ought to be clear that this isn't expected. If a council member is individually discussed during public comment, they may request from the mayor the opportunity to respond, as opposed to the mayor sort of expecting that they will. For the most part, I do think that the right response to the public is to listen during their public comment. And, you know, I would have a very high bar for responding.
I have a pretty high bar too,
including
and
things
it's been
like
crossed.
including things like outright slander or lies, you know. And I do think that it's important that we protect our ability as elected officials to speak, just as it's important for us to protect the public to be able to have their say as well.
Might you be able to take suggestions that we have discussed and bring this back in a more clean form?
Yeah, absent any objections from that last little bit of discussion, we
Yeah.
can work that into 3. Something else, John and I, we've talked about in the past, and want to bring this up. So the way this is phrased on the agenda allows us to discuss beyond just these proposed changes. It's all council rules and procedure. But we don't have a mechanism that if the council needs to waive council rules and procedures for any given reason. There's no method to do that currently. So one thing we were just talking about is if council would be open to the idea of including essentially a clause that these these rules may be waived at any time by a supermajority of the council members. So it would take a supermajority to say, you know what, we're not going to, I'd hate to pull one. Anybody have an example they want to use? I don't have a good one, but.
Yeah, a scenario that we would utilize that.
but
To allow
maybe it's
electronic participation or
public
something.
comment.
Yeah, I mean, about the public comment, if there's something you feel handicapped by, and that you would temporarily suspend the rules, and then if you're willing to entertain that, what's the threshold? Is it a supermajority of all the seats? Is it a supermajority of the quorum?
Supermajority of the quorum.
Uh,
Because I only imagine that if we're gonna do it, something bad must be really happening in the first place, and we should probably just deal with the people who are here.
A couple times when that might have been the
Yeah.
case. Okay.
Well, and then what's a supermajority? 3/4?
That's the highest bar that we have that isn't unanimous, and so I do think that, given that we're waiving rules, that should require 3/4 of the quorum present.
Yep.
Because
Yeah,
I'd
okay,
want
but-
5 out of 6, that'd be 4 out of 5. I think that'd be,
4 out of 5, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Sound good?
So you want to work with the wordage
Yep.
and then come back with that as well?
Yep, that's
Okay.
what we'll do.
That sounds great. I appreciate the work on this.
I know it's, so typically we do this review actually every other year when we have a new council, potentially new council members take their seat. So maybe it's fitting that with Cody here tonight, Councilmember Whittle. And are there any other rules of procedure that council members have taken issue with?
I
Or
want to
wanna
ask
discuss?
about the motion to reconsider and the rules related to it, just because it came up a fair amount of times during the vacancy. I'm curious, is this a rule that is dictated by state code, or is this simply our rules of operation?
No, the current rules came about because we kept having questions about a motion to reconsider, and people kept asking me, well, what do we do here? And I said, well, let's revise the rules. So I tried to make it clear. So if you feel that there's something that further needs to be tweaked, I think you need to do that. Now's a good time to talk about that, because I would say of all the rules, this is the one that there's the most questions about. And I believe this was amended last, right before you came on, Steve. So, and it was a result of, I can't remember what, but there were a number of motions where there was questions about motions to reconsider. And the prior rules were even more vague than these.
So to be clear, motion to reconsider is a council rule, not a state rule.
Oh, right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think we should revisit that.
Yeah.
for
And,
sure.
and before we were going off of Robert's rules, which were even more confusing.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, that's why.
I think my inclination is to leave them as they are, because it looks like we at least will have an opportunity to be able to waive rules. If let's say that we realize we really do want to reconsider the location of a stop sign in 3 months, I think the way to get there, if the supermajority of the council wants to do it, would be to waive this rule against bringing something back to the table. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Like, we are building in a mechanism to bring things back if we want to.
Maybe.
That's what I'm wondering. Okay.
I think what difficulty we might run into is, so waiving of the rules are typically the spur of the moment in the council meeting format, but for council to take action on any item, you need to have it on the agenda. So our council rules on motions to reconsider determine how it gets on the agenda. So right now, you need one member of the winning side to say, I support a motion to reconsider, and then anybody can be the second to get it on the agenda.
I would like to propose a change, actually. I think that anytime we have a 50-50 vote that fails, anyone should be able to bring it back to reconsider. Because if we have a 50-50 vote on a 7-member council, that means all council weren't here.
And that is how the statute reads, although that's not how I felt like we were informed. It does say that, something about a tie.
Yeah. Steve,
I'm
you
looking
got
for it.
Okay.
Is that in?
A motion to
yours?
reconsider, these are in the actual rules, Mayor.
Right.
Who may make a motion? A member who voted with majority, or in the event of a tie vote, any member. That's what our rules say. I don't feel like that's the presumption that we were operating with
So we
over
could,
the past few
I
months.
think that
Well,
we had,
the past few months, you still have the 2 meeting limitation.
yeah.
That's the problem.
but I didn't think it was any member. I thought it still had to be the losing.
The losing,
Yeah,
or the
so,
winning
so let's
side,
take stop
right.
signs, for example. When we voted against the stop signs downtown, that was a 3-3 vote. I assumed we couldn't reconsider it if you wanted the stop signs because it failed.
you were on the losing side. of
Yeah.
the vote, because it failed.
Yeah, I don't remember but, I mean, the rules are, in the event of a tie, any member may move for reconsideration.
And you have 2 council meetings or 2 weeks?
2 regularly scheduled council meetings.
Right.
And then, so along with that, if a new council member is seated, can something come back?
No, that doesn't change. I don't
Only
think-
in a regular election the following January 1st.
Right.
So even with Councilmember Whittle added, doesn't apply either.
Yeah, then I do think that we need to tweak these if that's the interpretation that staff are working with, because I think that when the council changes, the actions of prior councils shouldn't bind the hands of the current council. Which is to say that if the people elect a new council and add new members, it may be that they want to lead differently than how the council voted 3 months ago. And I actually have questions about whether or not that's even permissible for us to be restricted from voting on something because it came up 3 months ago when it was a different council seated.
I think it's your rules. I think you
Yeah.
can do it. I think you can restrict it. I mean, that's the reason why there's Robert's rules developed, to create some orderly process. And, you know, with this motion to reconsider, the idea is you don't want to re-debate something repeatedly, so it puts a limit on it. But they're your rules, and that's why if you do want to have that option, you pass, you amend your rules to allow that, to be able to bring it back. So there's nothing prohibiting you from amending these rules to allow that. I'm just telling you what the theory is behind having limits on a motion to reconsider are.
Well, then I think we should amend it to say that motions to reconsider are eligible whenever a new council member is seated. Because the council, they might very well vote differently, and the public deserves to have that possibility.
Which especially, I think just in given light of the situation that we were just in, I think there were several votes we took that may have passed if we had had 7 members. I don't know that, I'm just saying, right? They might have also failed by more. But it does seem to me that there should be an avenue for, the people just voted for someone who was running a campaign. It could be that there were issues that they really wanted to see happen, and we're hoping that maybe we didn't do.
And that's that idea, I would say, is somewhat consistent, not with the way the rules are written now, that motion to reconsider is reset after a general election, for the same reason you just said.
Yeah.
You got new people seated. You want to give them an opportunity to maybe come to a different conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
The rules just aren't written to allow for that when there's a vacancy prior to an election.
Probably just wasn't a consideration at the time.
No.
So I like Steve's idea that we do it if there's ever a new council seat, a new council switches or seat switches or something like that.
So is there wordage that you are changing or adjusting on this particular piece of the guide?
I mean, it's already allowed in the normal course of action on normal election times, right? It's just only when we have a special election to
Yeah.
fill a vacancy, which,
Yeah.
I mean, does that occur that often? I mean, very rarely, I think.
Hopefully not.
Happens every few years. Once every 4 years or so.
I mean, like next year?
Well, special
No,
election,
you
I don't
mean if it's a
actually-
special election.
No, she's talking about special election.
Special
We have Ross
election.
resign.
I got it.
Resigning, it won't occur.
Well, one year we had a lot. We had Johanna, Ross, and then Dan within a year.
I don't know, yeah, it was.
Oh, they all three resigned?
Mhm.
Okay.
They all moved.
Vacancies,
Oh, no, Dan did resign. Yeah, Dan
Well,
did
then
resign.
Maybe it happens more often than I was thinking, so. Yeah.
it's a fairly, instead of it being the first January following a regular city election, we just say following a city election.
Yep. No, I like that.
I think that would work.
Yeah, any city election.
Right.
Any
Any
city
city-
election involving a council member.
Council member.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Not after the referendum on the municipal electric utility.
Oh,
And I just also want to say that if we end up with a council minority that continually brings things back to the table by taking advantage of these rules, we can change them again, but I don't see the current council having a problem with that.
Well, and that's, so are we looking to insert that any council member may bring this back? Because just to that comment, that's one of the reasons why it requires the, member of the, winning side to
I meant
bring
it the
this-
other way, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
As
I'm just
long
saying that, I don't think people are going to take advantage of this, but if they do, we can change the rules.
As long as it's, so just for clarification, if it's a tie, anyone can bring it back.
And a tie means a 3-3 vote that fails or passes. I mean, we're saying when we say tie, we don't mean a vote with no result. We mean a vote with a result that equal numbers of people voted on both sides.
Well, a vote that, with a tie always fails.
Yeah.
So that's
I
a
just-
failed vote.
I just don't want someone down the road to say a tie means no result or, no one prevailed.
So if we have a council person.
Right, it says it failed, yeah.
If we have a council person absent at a particular meeting and it's a 3-3 tie and it fails, you can't bring it back.
No, you can. That's what we were just, you
Oh,
can.
yeah, right. You're-
And then that's why I'm interested in this, because there have been several votes we've taken that we were all like, oh, if everyone had been there, that might not have failed.
Okay.
So is that clear, Travis?
So really, it's just amending this.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on the rules of procedures?
I just want to say that last year we amended them to allow for some electronic participation in closed sessions. We had that happen a few times, and I always thought it was a good thing that it was possible. So I want to thank those of you who, supported that change and the staff for accommodating it.
Very good. Okay, city manager, department head, and council reports.
Oh, it's budget season and everything season. We've got a lot going on this year that we're trying to get ready to go for this construction season as well. And so I said it at the last meeting, I'll reiterate it again. I do apologize if I'm not as responsive as I normally am. So if you do, feel free to hit me with a second email. I did get another one of those today. That's fine. I'm working on some final formatting, but tonight in Dropbox for Thursday night, you should have essentially everything but a cover letter. I don't have a cover letter ready to go for the budget. Carrie and I worked extensively over the weekend, yesterday, today again, to make sure we've got an accurate picture. And overall, I'm pretty happy with where we're at. So that should be going in Dropbox here tonight yet. After the meeting, it's not going to look as pretty as it will at the end, but all that information's there.
Okay. Carrie,
Nothing tonight, Mayor.
anything else? Brent?
I don't really have anything. I just want to thank everybody in the staff for getting all the budget stuff ready to go, put out, and see you back here in 2 days.
Christopher?
Nothing tonight.
Kirsten?
On behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, it is Restaurant Week this week. Started on yesterday, so it runs through the 26th. Most of the restaurants in town are having specials and things like that. This is a slow time for most of those restaurants, so I encourage everybody to get out and eat.
Thank you. Steve?
I'm excited about budget times, and I'm especially grateful to staff for all the work they're putting into it this year, in particular, in the context of a lot of other work. Some of it useful and some of it busy work, but necessary, all of it. And just tremendously grateful and appreciative that you're making it happen, even if it's not on the timeline you'd like. So we'll get through this together. Thank you.
I can't believe I actually says it, because I'm grateful I don't have a 3-ring binder.
Wow. See? That's great.
I already went through and looked through all of it, so, and I might not have understood all the details, but I know where it's at, I know where to find it. Randy?
No, the only thing I have is a reminder of the Fireman's Gala, February 7th at
Thank you.
PG.
And that, you can go online and get tickets online. That's where you get them.
Buy as many as you want.
That's right. Cody, it's so nice to have you here.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just wanted to say it's good to be on Decorah City Council, and I'm eager to find comfortable footing and get kind of the flow of everything and find my place on the City Council, and just happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Hey, Emily.
I want to echo my colleagues' sentiments to staff. Thank you so much for getting the budget ready and for all of the things on your plate. There's a lot, and I think most people, probably even in this room, unless you've just moved here, have recognized that in Decorah we have a lot of hot topics that come up, and those hot topics consume our passions and unfortunately elicit these feelings of division. And I do, at least for my own part, understand that every decision that we have, every feeling, every passion is about loving Decorah and how we all love Decorah. And if I think we can hold that in our hearts, that we currently have a ballot issue that is really thinking about what's in Decorah's best interest, and people have different ideas on that. And it's okay to debate and discourse and dialogue and get angry and frustrated, but no, it's never about anyone having ill will or intention for our community. And I think that's always important to hold on to, because I hold on to that every night when I go to bed. So I wanted to share that. Also, I am going to have another community conversation. I had one last Saturday. It was great to have so many people show up. I think I had a 35-ish, maybe 40-ish people. And I got a lot of, I wanted to come but couldn't. So I will be having one of those, so keep up to date. I think it's going to be February 1st at Pulpit, but I'll let that go out later. And Pete, thanks for being here. I think your idea is awesome. And so if there's another council member or who wants to think about that with me, maybe we can talk and get together.
Kirsten said.
Okay, so thank you.
Mayor, can I just say one more thing I forgot to? Thank you, I appreciate that. I want to also make sure that we take time to thank not only Cody and welcome Cody, but also Kent and Paul for stepping forward and running for the open seat. We all have done that, or at least a lot of us up here, and it's not an easy thing to put your name on a ballot, to be evaluated by your friends and neighbors, and it's a brave act, and it's an act that almost no one does for the wrong reasons. And so I'm grateful for everyone selfishly putting themselves out there, grateful to the voters for participating in this important process, and excited to work with Cody going forward, but tremendously grateful to everyone who was on that ballot. So
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.